My friends, in a war of attrition like the one we can see in Ukraine, manpower is key. And it seems Russia is getting the upper hand, but this time without having to resort to mobilization. All the new soldiers are volunteers. Here from the Defense Post, Russian army's tempting offers paying off as recruitment surges sixfold. Or here, Putin says Russia recruited more than 430,000 to army this year. Russia's recruiting 25,000 to 30,000 new soldiers a month.
For the Emperor!
Hurrah! How exactly did Russia manage to grow such a massive army within only a year? How did Russia convince so many men to join the war? The strategy was simple. Get rich while serving your country. All across Russia, from rural areas to busy city centers, there are these massive billboards displaying army recruitment ads lined up one after the other. Even in the most remote areas of Siberia, you will find such leaflets with the bonus payments you will receive as a soldier. And that's without even taking into account the numerous recruitment commercials that were posted online.
Из чего же сделаны наши мужчины?
To drive the numbers up and meet the demands of troops at the front, Russian oblasts are put in a position where they're competing with one another to attract the most recruits. Here you can see the recruitment page for St. Petersburg. On the left, appeal to patriotism. Do like your ancestors during World War II. And then on the right, salary for the first year, with lots and lots of zeros. And if you enlist in Moscow, you can get even more money.
With full pensions from our treasury. And respected, rich, loved. You'll be treated by your wives and children as heroes for the rest of your lives.
Now, spoilers, one of the brilliant parts of this plan is how paying more money to soldiers allowed to completely bypass the corruption that is plaguing Russian society. So in this video we will analyze how this unique recruitment campaign works, why it brought very high results, but also how it completely bypassed the need for a new mobilization. At least, for now. If you're wondering how I keep up with all the political news related to the Ukraine war, it's because I used this app and website by Ground News for my research. I found this interesting story. Zelensky open to Western troops providing security for end to war in Ukraine. Ground News found over 458 articles covering this story. It immediately shows us how much of the coverage was politically left-leaning, how much was on the right, and how many sources were rated as relatively neutral. As you can see, this is a great tool for my research. You can also access Ground News by using my link, ground.news/HistoryLegends, to access the Vantage plan, and they're offering 50% off right now. Another feature of Ground News that I really like is the bias comparison tool. In one simple click, you can get a summary of what both the left and the right report. And if you don't have much time, just click here on bias comparison. We learned that the left employs emotionally charged language like the madness, highlighting Ukraine's heavy losses and the needs for an urgent peace, reflecting a dire tone, while the center is positioning Trump as a decisive leader, whereas the right emphasizes Zelensky's openness to foreign troops, reflecting a strategic pivot, which is not emphasized in the left and the center. On top of that, if you want to learn more, you can select similar news topics that you are the most interested in. What I also like is how when I click here, I can see what is the overall political leading of various news agencies. Another interesting feature is how I can filter articles. Let's say I want an article that is politically at the center with high or very high factuality and no paywall so I can read it easily. Amazing, we got 24 articles to choose from. Personally, as someone fascinated by warfare and geopolitics, Ground News is an invaluable tool that cuts through the noise. Ground News is giving my viewers 50% off their unlimited access Vantage plan. This is their best deal of the year and it will only be available for a limited time. If you're already a subscriber, you can send Ground News as a gift for 50% off as well. So make sure you use my link in the description below. I think Ground News is doing important work and I hope you'll check them out. Not only will you support the headquarters, but you'll also support a small team looking to hold the media accountable. September 2022. The Ukrainian offensive in Kharkiv Oblast shattered the Russian forces like a hot knife cutting through butter. The reason is simple. There were barely any Russian riflemen manning the front, since many of the kontraktniki returned home after the end of their contract, which expired around July and August 2022. Meanwhile, Bars battalions of volunteers and the militias from Luhansk and Donetsk were simply not enough to stop the Ukrainian advance. With the looming military debacle, on the 21st of September 2022, Putin announced the start of a partial mobilization in Russia. 300,000 reservists were to be called under the flag. Some already had combat experience, but many didn't. From a military perspective, the partial mobilization was a turning point, as it stopped the Ukrainian offensive and helped Russian forces stabilize the front line. The Russian Ministry of Defense also changed the terms and conditions. This time around, no fixed-term contracts, and mobilized personnel would have to serve until the end of the war. The problem was its negative effects on Russian society. Many men feared to be part of the next batch to be mobilized and sent to the front. In turn, hundreds of thousands left Russia and fled through bordering countries. Apart from mobilization, Russia could have called up some of its conscripts. As you know, every year 400,000 Russians go through military service for 12 months. The problem is this solution is once again highly unpopular in Russia. Most of the conscripts are very young, 18, 19-year-olds, and the Russian population don't want to repeat the same story as what happened during the Chechen wars, where poorly trained teenagers were literally sent to war. So if mobilization is off the table, conscripts is off the table. What solution remains? Meanwhile, in the first months of 2022, the recruitment and the arrival of Bars battalions of volunteers proved to be extremely disorganized. The Russian Ministry of Defense had to think of a sustainable way to replenish its ranks. That's when Yevgeny Prigozhin and PMC Wagner rose to fame. They had the creative idea of recruiting inside prisons to swell their ranks. Wagner came up with a new system, offering a salary of 100,000 rubles a month, plus a special enlistment bonus. Inmates would be pardoned after the completion of a 6-month contract. The recruitment campaign was very successful, even a bit too successful in the eyes of the MOD, but that's another story. A couple months later, the Russian Ministry of Defense followed a similar model. Here, the Moscow Times wrote, "The Kremlin is increasingly turning to creative measures to boost its troops, without formally declaring another unpopular mobilization. If glory, patriotism, and medals can't get the job done, maybe financial incentives, good old cash, would attract more people into recruitment offices." And it worked. Money is the decisive factor, as both one-time enlistment rewards and wages offered by the Defense Ministry far exceed the median salaries in their regions. In the first 3 months of 2024, 100,000 Russians enlisted into the armed forces. That means over 30,000 a month. In this graph by pro-Ukrainian media agency United 24, you can see how the number of Russian soldiers in Ukraine slowly increased to 330,000 in early 2023 to 370,000 by the end of the year. But then it skyrocketed in 2024, all the way up to 470,000 troops, and then again to 520,000 by the summer of 2024. According to Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief Syrsky, by the end of the year, the number of Russian soldiers in Ukraine could reach 690,000. That means 430,000 contracts were signed in 2024 alone. That's the size of the entire active duty component of the US Army. And now we understand how, from an operational perspective, the Russian military has launched much more offensives throughout 2024 than it did in 2023. It's simply because they have more troops available. So how exactly did Russia do it?
The Emperor protects.
Here's one of the many recruitment websites for the Russian armed forces with a bunch of information. Contract service, a worthy choice for a patriot. High monetary satisfaction, solving the housing crisis, a secure future for the family, right for pension after 20 years. In this one it says, become a defender of the fatherland with lots of zeros on the salary. The total amount of money a recruit gets by signing a contract with the armed forces consists of 4 things: a monthly salary, special allowances, a one-time enlistment bonus, and extra money from a bounty system. Literally like in a video game, you get points depending on your performance on the battlefield, but we'll get to that later in the video. Let's start with the monthly salary. For anyone that signs a contract for a duration of at least 1 year, the Russian army promises a minimum guaranteed monthly salary of around 200,000 rubles, or just under 2,000 USD. You have to remember that the minimum wage in Russia is about 160 USD a month, and many people in rural areas earn about $300 per month, which is just enough for them to get by. In Russia, $800 a month is considered to be a very good salary. Now check this out. The Russian army guarantees a minimum salary of $2,000 a month. That's essentially 6 times more money than a guy can expect working a difficult job outside manual labor somewhere in Siberia. 6 times more money. It's literally the wages of fear. As you can see here, depending on your position, you can even get a little bit more cash. For example, a rifleman gets 210,000 rubles, a driver 216,000, and as a squad leader you can expect to make 238,000 rubles. Let's take a look at the map of Russian losses on Mediazona. If we assume the recruitment rate is proportional to the losses, the oblasts with the highest number of recruits are located in the Ural region, like Tatarstan, Bashkortostan, Chelyabinsk, Yekaterinburg, Perm, all this area at the gate of Siberia. But as you can see, there are also a lot of recruits coming from the Far East, as well as from the Caucasus, namely Rostov and Krasnodar Krai, which is the homeland of the Kuban Cossacks. Typically, all these regions I just named are considered to be poorer than the rest of Russia. People living there tend to have lower salaries, less job opportunities, higher unemployment rate, and so on. By all financial standards, these volunteers now make up a rising middle class seeking to use the war as a ladder to prosperity. That means if you are a bashkir with no special skills, serving in the military could change your life forever. It's a one-time opportunity to raise yourself and your family out of poverty. Overall, a Russian soldier can expect the equivalent of 25,000 US dollars a year plus benefits. Think about it, that's the same as an entry-level pay for a US Army soldier. But we have to take into consideration that the cost of living in Russia is much lower in comparison using the same ratio to minimum wage. It's as if a US soldier earned something like $190,000 a year upon signing the contract. Almost 200k. Would you go to war for that amount of money? Not entirely sure, right? Well, it's the same in Russia. So that's why the Russian government also offers a panoply of allowances for volunteers, family support programs, free education for children, reduced fares for public transportation, housing benefits, subsidized water and electricity, special allowance for hookers. Oh, no, I'm told not the hookers, okay. Full access to military medical facilities for both soldiers and their family. Extra money for the soldiers with pregnant wives. Possibility of receiving a free plot of land. Those are really interesting benefits, especially for men that have families to take care of. But what about all the others? That's why the Russian Ministry of Defense also offers a one-time enlistment bonus. Since Putin's decree in July 2024, each volunteer gets 400,000 rubles from the federal budget, up from 195,000 rubles by the previous decree from November 2022. The order to transfer this one-time cash payment is issued within 10 days after the commander of the military unit submits the corresponding report. Now, there were cases where people just signed the contracts in order to just take the money and disappear. But then, let's just say they get actively chased by the FSB. Oh, by the way, if someone actually wants quick cash, there is even a refer a friend program. For example, in Tatarstan, if you don't want to go to war but you want to help the country and you're a good salesman, you can also get rich. If you bring your friend to a recruitment office and that friend ends up signing a contract, you get 100,000 rubles. That's almost $1,000. 3 months of salary for a guy in Siberia. Now on top of a monthly salary, special allowances, and the 400,000 rubles bonus from the federal budget, recruits can get yet another bonus. This time from the region they were recruited from. What ended up happening is that throughout 2024, Russia's federal districts have been competing with one another to offer the most generous amount in order to fill their quotas. For example, Krasnoyarsk, Perm, Ulyanovsk, and Irkutsk each offered an upfront payment of 400,000 rubles. That means even some of the poorest regions in Russia now equaled the 400,000 ruble federal contribution. This means every new Russian recruit gets at least 800,000 rubles upon signing a contract, or 7,800 USD. And it's not a surprise that all the oblasts I just named are around the Ural region, meaning the recruitment rate in those regions is very high and they don't need to increase the bonus. However, it seems some Russian federal districts were lagging behind. On July 29th, the Kaluga region increased payments from 100 to 495,000 rubles. Bashkortostan, 500,000 rubles as well. Lipetsk, Tula, and Smolensk regions offer 600,000 rubles. Chelyabinsk Oblast offers a 700,000 ruble bonus. Not bad at all. Could be interesting for Russian YouTubers that fled abroad, struggle to get views, and that are now stuck in Portugal. Rostov Oblast, 1.2 million rubles bonus. And I'm not done, it keeps going up. In the large urban centers, obviously you need more financial incentives to attract volunteers. That's why St. Petersburg pays recruits an extra 1.7 million rubles. In the capital region of Moscow, where most of the wealth of the country is concentrated, the sign-up bonus reached 1.9 million rubles. Listen up, that's 35 times the median monthly salary, or 3 years of pay up front. And that's not all. Moscow also adds another 50,000 rubles per month as salary supplement. So someone from Moscow can expect over 5 million rubles after 1 year of war, or nearly 50,000 US dollars. That's what the average worker in Moscow would earn in 7 years. Overall, this is the top 5. We went over Moscow, St. Petersburg, but then check this out. Second position, Nizhny Novgorod, and number 1, Belgorod Oblast, where Governor Gladkov increased the one-time enlistment bonus from 800,000 rubles to 2.6 million, $25,000 in bonus. It's important to mention that Russian oblasts seem to be under pressure to reach certain quotas by the 31st of December. Otherwise, On the 11th of November, the Moscow Times explained how the supply of personnel for the war has become something of a key performance indicator for Russian governors. Here, Belgorod Oblast seem to be in trouble. Not only is the enlistment bonus super high, but they even said that they're ready to pay your ticket from anywhere in Russia for you to sign in Belgorod. Overall, what I could see, the typical profile of a volunteer is the following. A man in his 30s or 40s that is living on the margin of society. He can't really fit in. He has no stable job, no stable income, most likely has problems with the Justice Department, probably some debts. Typically, these men have little achievements to be proud of in the civilian world. Signing a contract would allow them to prove themselves to their family and to Russian society, all the while going on some sort of adventure and the thrills of the unknown. Overall, that's how the Russian army grew so massive without having to resort to another mobilization or the call-up of conscripts. Additionally, these financial incentives could explain why the Russian armed forces are facing relatively few desertions. According to Bloomberg, only 10,000 cases could be reported, 10 times less than in the Ukrainian army. Goes to show you can buy loyalty, as long as you don't miss a payment.
Lannister always pays his debts.
A side product of this system is that it completely bypasses corruption. You see, instead of having people bribe various government officials to avoid being drafted, and thus increase the corruption present in the country, the current Russian system bypasses all these problems by using a financial reward system for those that volunteer for the SMO. Another benefit of increased pay that I noticed is how every Russian army unit can organize its own fundraiser within the ranks. There was this detachment of UAV operators where every fighter donated at least 10,000 rubles per month to the unit to buy various pieces of equipment like drones, and another 5,000 ruble supplement for extra food. A lot of the money is reinvested into the war effort. All these little things seem to definitely increase the morale of Russian military personnel. While scrolling through the recruitment page of Moscow Oblast, I stumbled on this part where authorities offer a bunch of military equipment to new recruits. On top of a rifle, helmet, flak jacket, Moscow Oblast offers gloves, knee pads, waterproof duffel bag, camouflage poncho, and much more. With that being said, every new recruit is strongly encouraged to buy additional protection and gear with their bonus. It's literally their life insurance. However, signing a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense also comes with a certain risk, such as death.
For the Emperor!
Honestly, I expected that on these recruitment pages, they would only bring up this topic at the very bottom in very small font. But actually no, they make it pretty obvious and they want every recruit to know what they're going into. For sure they will use euphemisms, but the information is there. They say that in case of an injury that gets you medically discharged, you receive a lump sum of 3.2 million rubles, plus 3 million in case of a serious injury, plus a monthly compensation for disability. In the section helping the family, which is a euphemism, 5 million rubles goes to the family of the deceased soldier. Once again, that's about 50,000 US dollars. I understand that no amount of money will ever replace the loss of a loved one, but it's better than nothing. In comparison from what I saw about the US military, the family gets a special tax-free payment of $100,000. Now, of course, this is Russia and there's always a little trap. All this money is available for people that sign a contract with the military for a minimum duration of 1 year. The other options is 3 and 5 years. Now, it seemed very strange to me that the Russian armed forces would once again offer such fixed-term contracts for a short duration. Not only is it one of the leading causes of their defeat in the fall of 2022, but think about all the problems in regards to retention of military personnel. Think of all these soldiers with combat experience that the Russians would lose every 12 months, only to be replaced with newbies and having to continuously launch these massive recruitment campaigns. I don't know, it feels like such a headache. On top of the rate of attrition, then you have so many soldiers just leaving the ranks at the end of their contract. This seems unsustainable in the long term. Too much manpower would be lost. So I did some digging. There was barely any information online. I talked to some people, and in the end, there are no one-year contracts. It's somewhat of a scam or false advertising. What nobody tells the recruits is that any contract is automatically renewed until the end of the war.
Hey, yo, what the?
Meaning you will not leave the military unless you're 6 feet under or medically discharged. I mean, that was essentially the same policy for the US Army during World War II. And it makes sense. Now, in order for Russian troops to cope better, they do say that soldiers have the right to take leave at any time convenient for them, if approved by their commander. In one of the interviews I saw, the Russian soldiers said that they don't like to take a leave of more than 2 weeks, because if they stay longer in the civilian life, the moment they get back to the front, they're very rusty, and thus this puts their life in danger. But you know what? It's okay, because Russian soldiers now get even more incentives to stay at the front and fight. By getting more money thanks to Russia's extremely capitalistic bounty system. Essentially, you get extra payments in cash for special distinctions. Literally like a video game. The Russian military command understood that in the modern age, medals are not enough to motivate the troops to excel in combat. So here are some of the special payments that you can get at the front. A Russian soldier can expect 8,000 rubles for every combat day. Every assault squad receives 50,000 rubles for each kilometer of enemy territory gained. So about 5,000 rubles per stormtrooper. And I'm pretty sure that even the soldiers that fell in combat during this push forward will have the money go to their family. But that's not all. 50,000 rubles for the unit that destroyed an enemy armored vehicle. 100,000 rubles for an enemy tank. Extra points if it's a NATO tank like a Leopard, Abrams or Challenger. 500,000 rubles. 1 million for capturing one of these NATO tanks. If you do so, you can also enter some sort of lottery system where you could earn an extra prize of up to 5 million rubles. It's literally better than Vegas. 200,000 rubles for the destruction of an enemy helicopter, 300,000 for the destruction of a HIMARS. They literally have an entire pay scale of rewards. I wonder how much for a destroyed American Brilliantly. In this article, we'll learn that in the period going from January 1st to the 31st of May 2023, over 3,000 Russian servicemen received payments for feats of arms. So it is really a thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think any military in the world has a bounty system similar to the Russians. Now, what is even more interesting is that this ultra-capitalistic cash reward system dates back from the Soviet army during World War II. For example, for the Hero of the Soviet Union award, that got you an extra 50 rubles. For each destroyed enemy tank, the crew were paid 500 rubles. If an infantryman destroyed a tank, that was 1,000 rubles bonus. Infantry scouts were entitled to a cash reward of 1,000 rubles for every 10 combat missions during the day, or for 5 missions at night. But this bounty system was also available for the Air Force and the Navy. Fighter pilots were paid 1,000 rubles for each enemy aircraft shot down, and 2,000 rubles if it was a bomber. Even mechanics got rewards. For each T-34 that you repaired, that got you an extra 500 rubles. Now, as you can imagine, this sum was symbolic, since there was virtually nothing to buy with money in the USSR. First of all, many never saw any of this money. And those that did sent most of these earnings to their family in form of vouchers. You could get a bar of soap for 50 rubles or a loaf of bread for 500 rubles. So that means a Soviet fighter pilot shooting down an enemy aircraft was entitled to 2 loaves of bread.
A great success!
Now, Soviet soldiers also had access to mobile shops, where with the few rubles they had, they could purchase anything that could make their lives a little bit better, such as getting a shave or going to the barbershop, or a bottle of vodka that you could share with your tovarich for 800 rubles. All this to say that there is a significant upgrade in this bounty system between World War II and today, where soldiers actually get financial incentives right into their bank account. So to conclude all this, now the big question is, how sustainable is this entire recruitment program? According to the latest reports, it seems that less volunteers are showing up in recruitment offices. Medusa reported on the 4th of December, the influx of volunteers into the Russian army has noticeably decreased, although the payment for signing a contract has doubled. Allegedly, the number of recruits is 600 per day compared to 1,200 earlier this year. If this is true, then it's a serious problem for the Russian armed forces, since frontline divisions need a continuous flow of troops to keep up with the war of attrition. We can think that many men wanted to spend one last New Year's and Christmas with their family and friends before signing up for the war in Ukraine. From now, we see 2 options. Number 1, recruitment goes back up in 2025, and then the Russian Ministry of Defense basically has to continue the same system. Number 2, if recruitment continues to go down, the most logical option would be to increase the bonuses once again. But can the Russian treasury sustain this? Additionally, Russia could face diminishing returns by constantly increasing payments, while only marginally getting more people to sign contracts. There's another option that Russian authorities are looking at. As you can see on the recruitment page of St. Petersburg, recruiters are offering to write off up to 10 million rubles in debt, the equivalent of almost 100,000 US dollars. So it will be very interesting how things develop in the coming weeks and months. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The links are in the description below.